the most effective method and the most entertaining one is... Hey guys, Lewis here, and in today's video I want to show you how to do language immersion at home. Now, if you don't know what language immersion is, it's essentially just immersing yourself in the language that you're trying to learn, even if you're at home. So you spend a lot of time listening, you spend a lot of time reading, and essentially you're spending your life, as much of your life as possible, in the language of your choice. And so I remember, a few years ago when I was really serious about learning English, I had not learned about language immersion. To me, it was just surround myself with as much English as possible. And everything that I watched and pretty much everything that I listened to was in English. So it was hugely effective. The most important component of language immersion is listening. A lot of people do a lot of activities like watching YouTube videos, listening to podcasts, but I think that probably the most effective method and the most entertaining one is using a combination of a streaming service in combination with a VPN. So when you're doing immersion, right, it's not like language immersion is a high yield activity. When you do language immersion, you do it for, let's say, 1 hour. You're not actually going to get a lot of language gains compared to doing 1 hour of, let's say, a more intentional learning activity like flashcards, for example. The type of learning that happens is different. It's a bit comparing apples to oranges. But in terms of language gains, I think most people would agree that doing the intentional activity of doing the flashcards, if done right, has a much bigger return on your investment when compared to language immersion. Now, with that being said, language immersion, because it is fun, because you can just listen to stuff that you love, you can just be working out, cleaning your house, and actually you're doing language immersion, because you can do it passively, there is huge value in here. So the value of language immersion is in the fact that it is not boring. It should be interesting. I would even go as far as saying that it should be compelling. This mix of being exposed to language that is compelling to you with content that is very interesting and doing it for a high number of hours for a long duration over the course of years, this is really the value of language immersion. You can use your off time, you're working out, you're cleaning, you're commuting, and you use this time in an entertaining way and in a way that you really gain a lot from a language learning perspective. Now, the main challenge here is how do you get access to content that is compelling and that is in the language that you're trying to learn? To me, the best option here is to get a streaming service like Netflix or Amazon Prime. This is not free. It's going to cost a little bit of money, but it's not so much that it's out of reach. The thing with Netflix and Amazon Prime and, streaming services in general is that you can have blockbuster movies from the US, for example, but you can have the dubbed version like in Japanese or in Spanish or in Italian. So if you wanted to watch, let's say, Fast and Furious in Japanese, you could potentially, but that's only if you're located in Japan, because streaming services, they limit the languages that are available to you based on your geographical location. And so the trick here is, well, let's say that you like Fast and Furious, right? You want to watch it in Japanese or in Spanish. Well, hypothetically, and the reason why I'm saying this is hypothetical here is that a lot of streaming platforms don't necessarily allow this. This is not in the terms of streaming platforms, but hypothetically, I'm not saying I'm doing this, but you could use a VPN to make it look like you're actually accessing the website from another country. I personally use Proton VPN. This is a software here, and I'm connected to Japan. And so you can do this if you're even outside of Japan. You connect to a Japanese VPN, and what this does is when you go to Netflix, you can see that actually you have access to a lot of titles in Japanese. And so I'm going to put a link to Proton VPN to the best price I can find in the description of this video. The combined cost of the streaming service plus the VPN, it's not that much. VPN services are not that expensive nowadays. You can get a 1-year subscription for not that much. My recommendation would be to watch first the movie or the TV show, whatever it is, first in English so you understand it fully, and then you actually listen to it repeatedly, but in Japanese. So you start to associate the meaning of the English story with the meaning of the Japanese story. If you're using Netflix on a mobile device, you may be wondering, well, how do I just listen to Netflix? I mean, the screen is going to be on. I can't put it in my pocket. It's very inconvenient. I have a little trick. I don't know if a lot of people know about this, but if you have the Netflix app on your phone, you're watching the movie, then you turn off the screen, then you turn it back on and just press the play button. So it's just playing the audio, and then you can just turn the screen off. And just by doing this, you can actually listen to movies in your target language from Netflix in the background. I mean, this is pretty amazing. Imagine this, you're just commuting and listening to movies that you like and learning languages at the same time. Now, I just want to put a little bit of a note here because I don't really want to make language immersion look like a panacea, because it's really not. I realized that recently there's been a surge of people really learning through input, that is learning through listening and reading, and I suspect that most of these people are following or they're inspired by the work of Dr. Stephen Krashen with his input hypothesis. And, don't get me wrong, I mean, language immersion and input, it's really a great way to learn languages, but it's not a panacea. It's not the holy grail. I would recommend personally that you also do some intentional learning activities, such as, for example, flashcards. So I've talked about this in my interview with Professor Paul Nation, but one of the most efficient intentional learning activities that you can do is learning with flashcards. So for example, I personally use Anki, which is a free piece of software that you can download from the internet. I mean, a lot of language learners use Anki, and you can download vocabulary decks for free from ankiweb.com, and there are plenty of decks with thousands of flashcards with thousands of words that you can learn. Obviously, I also have my own decks that I have made. You can check them out at ankicoredex.com with the 10,000 most common words for a lot of languages. I mean, you can check it out, but you don't need to buy anything from me. There's also a lot of these decks for free if you want. So now I want to address the question of how many hours should you spend immersing every single day. My recommendation would be whenever you're doing something that is physical, where your mind is not engaged, then that is a good time for you to put your earphones in and use the combination of a streaming service and a VPN to get some listening in. So when you're sleeping, I really don't believe that this has much of a benefit. If anything, I tried it and it actually interfered with my sleep. As far as listening when you're working, I mean, I just find this very distracting. I've been thinking a lot about language learning approaches in the past few weeks. My observation has been that a lot of people fail. Actually, most people fail at language learning because they give up at some point. And, there's a plethora of language learning techniques, and most of them work. But yet, people are maybe using them. They're using a bunch of techniques, but they're still failing. They're still giving up. The success rate with language learners is very, very low. Lately, I've been approaching language learning in more of a minimalist way. And this is sort of a solution I've been thinking about is you don't need to do everything. You don't need to have the optimal approach when it comes to language learning. It's just about doing the right things. Just do the 20% that is going to get you 80% of the results. And for me, this 20% is really doing your listening, doing language immersion at home using a streaming service and a VPN. And the second activity would be doing Anki, so like doing flashcards with, a vocabulary deck that you can get from the internet. And these two activities, yes, they don't necessarily cover everything that you need to know, but this is really the 20% that's going to get you 80% of the way there, even 90%, I would say. So anyway, I hope that you liked this video on language immersion, and I'll see you in my next video.